I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Dan.
And welcome once again to the Comic Vault. Today we are doing the final section of Walt Simonson's Thor, and this is 375 to whatever the last one is. Dan, it's the last...
382.
Yes, thank you. It's the last 8 issues of this, and wow, I can't believe we are finally here, Dan. We are...
It's bittersweet. It's good to like read all of it and do the review, but at the same time, this was just a fantastic experience going back and reading all this. I'm kind of sad it's over, to be honest.
This is going to sound goofy. I'm going to say it anyway. Walt Simonson's Thor changed my life in at least small little subtle ways. It made me appreciate Thor, and that's the big thing I take away from this, is I never cared about this character before. I feel like I look at this totally differently. I think it's changing the way I look at fantasy to a degree, Dan, because I've never really cared for like sword and sorcery stuff. This is kind of that, and I don't know, man. I got really sucked into this world. It's fully realized. These characters came alive for me. It's really like theatrical and bombastic and over the top, and yet these are real people, and I cared about them, and even the bad guys, they can't. It wasn't just a I'm evil and I have to be evil kind of place. Like everybody, even the ones that are supposed to be that way, everybody had more dimension than that. I couldn't believe it. And we get to the end of this, and this stuff is riddled with that, right? Once we get into Hela and we get into like Scourge and stuff. Wow, I'm so my whole world as far as comics go was really kind of turned upside down by this book, and I'm sure this is not anything new for a lot of comic book fans, because Simonson obviously is one of the big seminal runs on anything Marvel. I mean, I think if you said here are the top 5 best things anybody ever did in Marvel, I think Simonson would be somewhere in there. And so I'm glad I finally got to do this, and I'm glad I got to share it with you folks. Wow, what was it like reading it a second time?
To be honest, I liked it a lot more because I was able to pick up on things that I had just missed before. And I never had when I first read this was kind of early when I got back into comics in high school. And I didn't have the appreciation for some of the older style comics in the same way that I do now. Like, this is very much written in the sort of vein of what I call like a Stan Lee or a Claremontian kind of thing, where there's people sort of explaining when the things they're doing, even though you can see them, but like it's overwritten to some degree. Like, that's maybe the one criticism I make of the run as a whole, just because that's the style that people were writing in back then. It's not really Simonson's fault. It's just like that's the way you did the craft back then. Things have changed since then.
What you're criticizing were the conventions of the time.
Exactly. So, you know, and that's going to happen with anything you go back and look at from the past. There's going to be some sort of datedness to it to some degree. Some things are timeless. There's always exceptions. But I really liked going back to it because I was able to pick up on all of the interesting character dynamics and ideas that I missed before. And that's the crux of why this is such a great run and why it'll be remembered, you know, as one of the greats. Yeah, I just had a fantastic experience going back and reading it.
I used to look at Thor comics and go, I don't like that like old worldly font. That was enough to turn me off from it. Like I have such a different way of looking at this now.
Yeah, and you know, fair enough. Sword and sorcery has always been the kind of thing where I've always liked, you know, the idea of the whole thing. I like that aesthetic, like the sword and board, knight and shining armor kind of thing. I've always thought the Arthurian myths and stuff were really interesting. So Thor was kind of something that I checked out to like sort of whet that appetite or fill that void that I was having by reading at the time. And I just didn't expect it to be this engaging, and like I didn't expect to like the parts on Earth and with the humans as much as I did, because like when we talk about the Thor movies, that's really all we complain about is the stuff with the humans, and Simonson's able to make it completely engaging. Like, the crux of this whole run, when you get to the end of it, is like, you take Thor's humanity away, he's just rage and some immortal being that doesn't have any feelings. Like, he gets in the destroyer armor and he just wants to kill everything and abuse his power and use it for personal gain, for like petty revenge, like the ancient Thor was, and how Thor was, you know, before, you know, we started this whole arc of him when Marvel started. Simonson uses that destroyer armor thing as a device to examine, like, where Thor was and how far he's come up to this point. And I find that to be a really engaging thing. Like, you have that parallel with the kids, like they're all in Asgard, like doing their things, and they feel really inadequate because they're not able to like be as strong as them and stuff. And they end up teaching the Asgardians things. We talked about this before, like how being human in this book, it's really complicated. Like, it's not better or worse than being a god. It's just different. It's a different experience. It's very nuanced. And I like that a lot about it, that it has this kind of duality. And that's, you know, where the run kind of ends, and that's the whole theme of the thing by the end. He ties it up really nicely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's such an appropriate way to end it with Thor as the Destroyer, because he's the god of thunder, but he's gotten to a point before this where he tempers the thunder. So if you're just thunder, you're just cracking it, whatever. Like you're just a force of nature, and that's what the Destroyer is. It destroys everything. Everyone is terrified of it. Nothing can get away from it. Hela is Hela, and she can't do anything against the Destroyer. And so, I think it's really cool, as you said, that we get to this place where we get to appreciate where Thor has come, both during this run and even before it. Where he's not just the force of nature anymore. He is a human that tempers, you know, I mean, he's not a human, but you know what I mean.
Right.
He has a humanity within him. He tempers this power, and then we get to see that contrasted with what he would be like if that had never happened. And of course, you appreciate the things that you have a lot more when you lose them. And here for a minute, we lose that.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I love like the final scene we get with Thor and Loki at the end of this, because
I do too.
That like, he beats Loki at his own game. The guy that's not supposed to think and just hit stuff. And Loki, like, that's his main deal with Thor. He's like, I can't stand him. He's like this oaf that just swings at anything. Like, you know, the classic saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like nails. So, like, that's the way Thor tries to solve every problem, and Thor just outwits Loki, and Loki's had it coming this whole run, right? Like, it's so good to see that payoff, Loki to get his comeuppance at the end.
Well, and also it makes so much sense, because look at the people that Thor's gone up against. You not only Loki, but you had Malekith, and it's like, if Thor can beat those people, and he obviously, and Hela too, like, he keeps having to start developing smarts, and if he can beat those people up until this point, it wouldn't have made any sense at all if he beat Loki just by smacking him in the face. And so what I always love about Loki is that, yeah, you're right that Thor beats him at his own game, but Loki tends to beat himself.
Yes,
and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about him, and he does that again here, because he keeps complaining about what Thor is and how much superior he is to Thor, but hasn't he taught Thor how to beat him? Isn't that ultimately what's happened?
Yeah, I mean, like, the fact that Loki is so arrogant is always his downfall, and the fact that Thor now has humility is what makes him able to beat Loki and rise above him.
Yeah.
The fact that he's humble and able to realize, well, maybe I do have some things to learn. Loki is the guy in the room that's like, I know how to do everything, don't tell me how to do anything. I can do it better than you in any situation.
Thor, I think partly it's because he's spent time with humans, and he's come to respect how they overcome weakness. Yeah. And so he has this objectivity that Loki has never learned. So Loki underestimates everybody. Mm-hmm. Because he thinks he's so much better than they are. And so he's always a few steps ahead of people, or thinks that he is, but then he's not thinking about the things that they might be able to do to go up against him, because he wouldn't go up against the people he went up against unless he thought that they couldn't beat him. Like Loki doesn't look for a worthy adversary like Thor does. He just looks for whatever he can manipulate. So he enjoys the game, sure, but he enjoys manipulating people weaker than him. He enjoys the kind of cat and mouse chase, right? And so he's looking for mice. He's not looking for other cats. And Thor looks at him like another cat.
Exactly, and it's interesting. It's indicative. With Thor, it always goes back to heritage too. Like,
yeah.
See, we talked a lot about the great handle that Simonson has on this Viking kind of culture that these Asgardian beings have, and that's totally the way they looked at warfare. Like, it was honorable to die on the battlefield against a worthy adversary. That made you go to Valhalla. You just drank for eternity and had a party. Like, that's what they.
And Loki is a coward.
Yes, he is. And Loki, importantly, is not Asgardian born. He doesn't have that heritage and that pedigree that Thor has, even though he was raised in the same environment. And that's really interesting.
Yeah, and so you got that nature-nurture kind of vibe running through this, because we do have a lot of things in Simonson's world where he's showing that people can become more than the sum of their parts. And so exactly. Loki, because we see that in this with Scourge, right? Boy, here's a guy that you never would have expected to suddenly turn around. I bought it. To suddenly turn around and have this vein of nobility in him, and I really enjoy how he has this kind of ultimately really kind of complex character where he comes to develop this kind of honor that I don't think Loki ever had, really. And I mean, Loki's complicated. He shows that a little bit here and there. It happens, and that's why Thor can still appreciate him in this. And we'll talk about that because their relationship is so complicated. But then, like this guy never says anything. Like Simonson creates this kind of complex character who doesn't have a mouth. He doesn't talk. He never says anything. And I think that's really cool. So what I'm saying is, if that guy can become the sum of his parts, because he was basically just exists to kill things.
He was the destroyer, like Thor was.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, if that was supposed to be his nature, and he can overcome that, and I think Simonson is saying he's overcome that. He's developed an appreciation for the Asgardians, and he helps these children. I thought all of that was really kind of touching. Then wouldn't you say that Simonson is saying Loki could too, but he chooses not to, or probably? Yeah,
it's interesting. Like, you don't know whether to feel bad for Loki because he's like has this doomed heritage where you just can't overcome it because the frost giants are just inherently power hungry, and like we see this in here. The frost giants culturally, like, they're always trying to one up each other, and like, you know, as soon as a leader shows weakness, they're going to take them down and try to take their place, because it's like the strongest leader is the one that should lead and survive. And that's kind of the attitude Loki has about things. So it's like, was he born like this and he can't change, so you feel bad for him and he's a tragic character, or is he the character that you love to hate because he chooses not to overcome those things, and that's what makes him interesting? What's the motivation? What's the psychology behind that, you know?
Yeah, and I think that if a writer ever came down on it, he would immediately become less interesting.
I agree.
And we see this with a lot of characters like this. These are the villains I love the most, are these kind of chicken and the egg villains, where it's like, why are they? I feel like Magneto is like this too. Why are they the way?
And the Joker too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, do they use their plight as an excuse? You know, is that the justification for the things they're doing? Or is it so complicated that they don't even, they're like, they're like this because they think they have to be, you know, where it's like, well, that's my nature, there's nothing I can do about it, you know, that sort of thing. So, I mean, there's a lot of layers to that. And so, you can't come down on it one way or the other. I mean, if you want to be optimistic about it, I tend to look at it with a character like Loki, especially with the kind of dynamic that he and Thor have in this. I tend to look at it as Loki could change, but he chooses not to because he has an addiction, and his addiction is power.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's funny about it too, and this is kind of the sort of scary thing, is that Thor has an addiction too. Thor's addiction is adventure, and it just so happens that it's easier to be the noble, good, more altruistic character, and that be your addiction. So how much of it also with Thor is nature? And so you can't just look at it with Loki as, okay, well, he is naturally this way, but Thor made a choice. Well, but I mean, like, yeah, Thor did come to a place, and he did have a character arc, sure, and now he's a little bit more of the altruistic character. But some of what he does is also nature too, right? Oh, so there's a nature-nurture vibe between both of these characters, and that's what makes them interesting. Throwing them together, you got that, you got that kind of brotherly thing. You got that kind of Lex Luthor Clark Kent thing going on to a degree.
Yeah, exactly, and it adds another layer to the thing we were just discussing about how, like, how much empathy can you have for Loki if, like, he has this addiction to power? So is that necessarily his fault too? Like, he was born into a royal family and has been bred since birth to maybe ascend to the throne. If Thor had died, he would have been next in line if he played nice, you know? Like, he had been Odin had brought him up that way. Another nurture argument, you know.
Yeah, well, and remember when I reviewed the Thor movie for Superhero Rewind, I said that I thought a lot of what Loki did was kind of Odin's fault because of the way they were raised. He kind of seemed to sort of pit those two characters against each other and say, someday one of you is going to take my throne. I'm like, that sounds like a horrible thing to say to your children. You know, because what are they going to do to each other while they're growing up, and how much of that is Odin's fault? And of course, earlier on in this, we talked about also how complicated Odin is, and all that stuff. So you say, yeah, I mean, you've got that, but also let's remember that Loki not only has the right to the throne to a degree in Asgard, but he was also the son of another king. So anyway, you slice it, this guy is supposed to be royalty. You can't totally fault him, again, looking at this culture the way it is, where royalty there's a right, you know, of royalty. Right. They're like, well, he kind of is by blood deserving of something, and he gets the short end of the stick all the time. You know? He does.
Yeah, and that's again makes you feel empathy for him.
You sort of feel for him.
It's such an interesting kind of relationship you have with this character, and that's why I love Loki as a villain so much. He's one of my favorite Marvel, if not supervillains of all time. I love Loki. But like, and the thing about Odin, you were talking about how they were raised too. In a way, like, Loki, don't get me wrong, Loki does some terrible things, but like from Odin's perspective, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't it make both of his sons stronger if they compete against each other?
Well, yeah, there's that.
And that's the kind of culture that the Vikings have, right? Like, you face an honor-worthy foe to the death.
Well, what makes it also really kind of interesting, too, is Thor the god of thunder and is Loki the god of mischief because they were assigned those things or because they were naturally born that way?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Why are they the gods of those things? And if it was just, well, we need a god of mischief because you got to explain mischief, then you can't fault Loki for most of what he does because he's supposed to be mischief. You know what I mean? So, like, that's a thing that I always had with Greek gods, too, where, like, you know, certain Greek gods would get, like, in trouble for things, and you'd be like, yeah, but that's the god of war. What you gonna do? I'm the god of war. I'm gonna make war. Well, yeah, exactly. What do you expect? You know, and so, again, it becomes, I hate to keep saying this, but it becomes kind of a nature-nurture thing. It's like, if I'm born and Captain Logan is called, you know, the god of waffles, then in the morning you're getting waffles, dude.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's such a complicated relationship, and I love the brotherly aspect they have to it, because, like, you know, Thor, like, at the end of this, he, like, kind of one-ups Loki in a playful way, you know? Like, he doesn't stick it to him and say he's, like, the most evil, like, you know, loathsome being in all the 9 realms. He's just kind of like, brother, I bested you, you know?
See, I didn't see it entirely like that. I see what you're saying that, and then there is some of that. Yeah. But I think there's something a little bit more profound going on there. I think that what's happening at the end is that Thor is saying, do not mistake, and he comes out and says this, do not mistake what I've done this whole time for weakness. You know, don't think that just because you and I had that moment where we had to team up for a minute, and you know where I helped you and saved you and stuff, and that we're even the way that Loki says they're even because they both helped each other for a minute, and that, you know, your daughter did this to me. Don't think that you know I'm a weakling and that you have the better of me. You know I have all of this strength, and he puts him in his place, and I think he had to, you know, like, I think that's that's a place where, because I mean, look at all the horrible things that happened to Thor, you know, because of Loki during this section, and you know what, I think part of the arm break thing at the end, you know, I mean like there's something kind of symbolic going on there. It's like, you know, your strong right arm, you know, you want to be powerful, you broke his arm. Like, there's something, like, representative going on there, and I think that part of the reason he does it, and he doesn't bring this up, but I think part of it too is, you made my entire world, or not, you made all of Asgard sick. You know what I mean? Like, you are still trying to take over like this, and like, I think part of it, and maybe I'm reaching when I say this, is just because I'm the king of Asgard, don't think that I'm not going to protect them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're completely right about the profound things you were talking about going on. It's like, Thor's sort of like leaving the ball in Loki's court, right? He's saying, look at this weakness I overcame, don't, like, mistake. And now I'm going to break your arm, you're going to have this weakness I had, your turn to overcome it and learn a lesson from this.
Yeah, because remember, importantly, the break that he gives him, he breaks his arm, and he can't magic his way out of it. Something about it, I don't know how the heck it works, but it's this magic arm break where he's going to have to naturally heal. And so, yeah, you're right. It's now you've got to, in a small way, overcome the thing I just overcame. And look, I'm strong again. I got my strength back, and no thanks to you. And I did it myself.
And that's the kind of tough love thing that I would totally picture a Norse Viking person doing,
Side note, there's a thing in this that I never really thought about before, that they don't really deal with a lot, but it just occurred to me. So, if I'm getting my family tree right, Hela, so that makes Thor Hela's uncle?
Yes.
I never thought about that before. That's really...
He almost, completely obliterated his niece.
Yeah, there's a thing... But, I mean, fair enough. Look at the horrible thing she's doing. Something that's really interesting about all of this is... And it's very Shakespearean in this way. I know we keep bringing that up, but it is. This is not just... Here's... And, of course, there's a lot of this in Greek mythology, too. And, obviously, Norse. But, mythology has this thing, right? Where it's not just... Here are all of these... really powerful deities all vying for power. They're all related to each other. This whole thing is a family feud. Well, not even family feud, because a family feud is usually a family versus another family. It's all like internal family strife. So everything that we're dealing, almost everything we're dealing with between all the gods in this, not all of it, but a lot of it, is like an internal family matter.
Yes, exactly.
I just want to tack that on there. I think that's kind of interesting, because you can look at this on a very big grand scale, but it's also intimate.
It is, and that's what I've always sort of liked about the Thor comic books. Is I'm a big admirer of Shakespeare's plays, and that sort of internal family strife thing is just kind of a staple of that stuff. And it's kind of like a welcome home to see like a story play out in that fashion, because it immediately, even if you don't write the relationships as intimate, like you said,
inherently,
there's a sense of intimacy just by the virtue of them being related,
Yeah, well, and what we're exploring is human relationships, we're just because you're family doesn't mean, and sometimes because you're family, it heightens this obsession with one-upping each other, with having power, with there's this jealousy, and would all of that stuff be as significant if these were just a whole bunch of people that didn't know each other before? I think it's one of the things that it's two things. First of all, in a very weird way, we relate to it more because we've all had issues within our own families, and they're in its family politics, and isn't it interesting and also regal stuff. Your politics inside of a monarchy are the same as your family politics. Yes. So to see that played out on this grand scale, it makes a lot of sense. And so the reason that we're relating this to Shakespeare is because Shakespeare lived in the royal court of England, during the time of Queen Elizabeth, and so he was writing about those things, and that was the world that they lived in. But we can relate to it because we've all had family issues and stuff. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's something almost inherently comedic, and I mean comedy in, again, the Shakespearean sense of comedy, with the fact that you've got all of these family things playing out, and these these skirmishes and things that affect everybody else around them. It's this isn't like if you and your mom got it in a fight.
Right.
Hardly anybody else would be affected except for people in your immediate family. When that happens here, all hell breaks loose, literally.
The Earth almost got destroyed because of this.
There's something inherently amusing about that.
Yeah. It's almost like a dark humor kind of absurd.
It is. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
And remember, again, the Greek mythology had that too. Zeus slept around with everybody, and it ruined everybody. Oh, yeah. It ruined everthing,
Yeah, and then I just can't remember the name of his wife off the top of my head right now, and she would get angry at people, go and persecute the
Hera.
he slept with and their children. So it's very similar stuff, and I think to some degree Norse mythology has roots in Greek mythology. I don't know which one came first, but a lot of the characters do have sort of anagrams.
I would assume Greek predates Norse.
Yes, I would assume that too.
But I don't want to sit here and act like I know what I'm talking about
when
it comes to that stuff.
Sure. But yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment, and I'm really impressed with the fact that Simonson was able to bring that sort of Shakespearean flavor to this, because like we've read Thor before, like, you know, Jason Aaron's Thor isn't as Shakespearean as this stuff is. It's still really good, and it's about the same character. He's saying different things with the character. It's his own voice. I just don't think he has the same sort of like Shakespearean theatricality and flair.
Yeah,
it's different, you know?
Flair is a good word. I don't think that it's as, and I mean, it's maybe unfair to compare them, but I don't think that it's as like light as this.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Although I mean, this gets kind of dark. I don't know. The flavor's different.
Yeah, exactly. And like this doesn't have the same sort of Shakespearean stuff going on as like JMS's Thor. I don't know. Like I think of the Thor that I've read, even like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby stuff, which, you know, Stan Lee loves to ham it up. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think Simonson does it in a way that, like, you know, the stuff with Stan Lee, like the situations get ridiculous sometimes, and the character stuff still works, but it's not as rooted in like real human emotions as this is. Like he's able to do it in such a way that I'm really impressed by, you know?
If we're going to start comparing this to more modern things,
sure.
May I make a comparison?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
This reminded me at the end, and there are more historically, because there's more time that passes between the early stuff and what I'm about to mention. It's a little bit different. Sure. This reminded me a lot of Wade's Daredevil at the end of it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because when I got to the end of this, I realized that we when we think Thor now, a lot of the time we think Simonson, and we think of all of these original things that he created, and he was building on everything that was there already. And that's the thing that we don't think about. You know, I mean, like, yeah, he created some major important characters. He invented Malekith. He invented Beta Ray Bill. But he brings the Destroyer back at the end of this. I mean, like, is that not exactly the same thing? I don't want to ruin this for Wade people, as what Wade does at the end when you, well, it's not exactly the same thing, but in a similar way with what Wade does at the end of his first run on Daredevil before the numbering starts over, when you find out who was the mastermind behind everything. Like we're kind of going back to one of the earliest and biggest and most important Thor things in a run that is known for originality. Like, he's doing what a lot of the best works of anything do, which is building on what was there already and going new ways with it and adding to it. I don't think this would have been as successful if he'd made everything up from scratch.
No, I definitely agree. There's definitely a love and reverence for the old Thor comics in this that shines through. Like, you can tell Simonson eats this stuff up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
Like, this is his zone. He really likes to do this stuff, and he's even going back to like the Norse myths with the Midgard serpent and stuff in here. Like, that's a prophecy in Norse legend. Like, Thor's supposed to fight this giant serpent as Ragnarok starts. So, you know, he's not just going back to old Thor things. He's going back to like ancient Norse Thor things, which is really cool. Yeah,
one of our and I didn't go confirm this, but one of our viewers claims that Balder really was a Norse mythology character.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah.
Cool. I didn't know that.
I wish I'd looked that up before this. I forgot all about it until you just mentioned that. But yeah, I mean, like, so what I'm saying is there are probably a number of things in this that came from his studies of Norse myth that we don't even know about.
Right, exactly.
Because you and I haven't sat there and done all that studying. There's a part of me that wants to. By the way, let me mention real quick, because I just thought of this, that just a quick plug, because I'm going to review this. He's about to do a big Thor thing at IDW called Ragnarok. And he's gonna go. So Simonson is gonna go back to Norse mythology and do his own Thor from scratch. That's not related to the Marvel stuff, and just do the End of Days and do Ragnarok. Apparently, like that's apparently what it is. And so I got a feeling that we're gonna learn a lot more about Norse mythology, getting it away from the Marvel stuff.
Yeah,
when he does
really
that,
interesting.
That's fascinating. Because I heard, he's returning to Thor. I went, yes, Simonson's back to Thor. Oh wait. He's making up his own Thor? That's interesting. I bet it'll be great. We don't know how long it's going to run yet, and the review and the interview I read with him made it sound like he was hoping it would be a long run. So
that would be awesome. Yeah, I definitely would like to read that when it comes out. That
so anyway,
awesome.
Just want to throw that out there. I think that's absolutely fascinating. What more specific things should we talk about?
Let's see here. I really enjoyed the fact that Thor makes his own armor in the end to protect him from this weakness rather than Tony Stark building the whole suit for him.
Yeah, me too. I was worried about that for a minute.
I did like that when you're contrasting the two characters, like we were talking about Thor and Loki before, because ultimately this run ended up being a comparison between those two people and why they're so different, why Thor succeeds and why Loki fails a lot of the time. And Thor succeeds in overcoming this weakness because he goes to Tony Stark. He's not afraid to ask his friends for help, and then more importantly, he has friends. Loki doesn't have friends. He has pawns in a game that he manipulates. He manipulates even his own daughter to do things that he wants her to do.
Yeah.
They are not friendly. They do not have a father-daughter positive relationship at all. So I liked that Thor went and asked Tony Stark for help, and he was able to help him. But I also liked that in the end, Thor was able to overcome that physical weakness of his own accord. It's a dual sort of weakness thing, like we've always said with these kind of magic curses and love potions and stuff like that. Like, they have a physical weakness a lot of the time, but it's also sort of a representation of what they're going through emotionally. And I really like that Thor forged this armor in the fires of a human factory. You know, he went to the site of human inventiveness and innovation, the places that churn out the greatest things that humans are capable of making, and creates this armor that helps him overcome this great weakness. That was a really great scene for me. I really liked that.
It's kind of poetic. It's really fitting, and it was really smart of Simonson to go there because, first of all, Thor is the one god amongst all of the Asgardians who has this kind of appreciation for the humans. Again, as we talked about before, it kind of helps that he is half human. That's the thing that doesn't come up nearly enough.
Yeah.
But he's got that in common with Hercules. Amusing that Hercules is also a Marvel character, and
right.
so Thor goes to Earth, and anybody else this happened to on Asgard would be completely at a loss.
Yeah,
it would be like throwing them on a desert island and giving them nothing to work with. Thor knows how to use his surroundings. He's like Kirk in Arena dealing with the Gorn. He knows how to make stuff. He knows what to deal with, and it's because he has this appreciation for humans, and he spent time with them, and he doesn't see them as beneath him. So the reason that he's able to overcome that weakness isn't just this easy MacGuffin like it totally could have been. And there have been a couple places in this run where we've kind of cried foul, where it's like that was an easy magic way out. That didn't happen here, and it was really important that it didn't, because you've got some major character progression with Thor where he's matured through this whole arc, where I'm not sure that the Thor at the beginning of Simonson's run would have known as much what to do here as the Thor at the end of this. It seems like it comes at really the right kind of place where he's now being tested. He's come to an emotional place, and now he's having that tested. And you want to do that with your protagonists. It's what helps us care more about them. First of all, yes, having a character being proactive is important, but also how they got to the point where they even knew what to do, is important. And so you keep throwing these things at them. And I think it's also important that he's brought to his lowest place in order to fully beat it when he has to when he has to play that insane trump card and become the destroyer at the end.
Yeah, and I think the best thing about this run is it takes a basic assumption to get the ball rolling at the beginning of the Marvel Thor story and makes a giant character progression out of it. Like, we're told at the beginning of the Marvel Thor run that, Thor goes to Earth. He, has Donald Blake as a, body sharing host thing. That relationship is kind of strange, and it really.
Oh wait, so that was a real person?
Yeah, he's a real dude. He goes into a cave, finds a cane, then taps on the ground, and he turns into Thor. So they share like a consciousness. They're both separate beings.
Okay, see, because Simonson made it clear to me in this that like he was turning into a human whenever he was Blake, and the distinction with that and Sigurd is when he's Sigurd, he just puts on a pair of glasses like Clark Kent, and he still looks like Thor. But I didn't realize that Blake was a real person.
Yeah, he was a doctor, and like the thing about it was he was like this kind of like because he had a cane, he was kind of a cripple, and Jane Foster never liked him, or like he didn't think that she would because he was like, oh, who wants to like date a skinny old crippled guy like me, and that was the whole like romantic tension thing. But the basic assumption at the beginning of the Thor run is like Thor comes to Earth, he meets humans, and he realizes that humans are cool, and he has things to learn from. He learns that lesson, and then we move with Thor being invested in the human strife, and he helps out with our problems. Well, Simonson says, let's actually make him learn those lessons. Like, he like goes through this whole run, and he like it's not just like he spends a day with a human, and he's like, oh well, the lesson at the end of the day is I need to have more humility and be more humble, and not underestimate people. He really spends time with these people and gets to know like what the positive aspects of humanity are and applies them to himself.
I love that he has a construction worker job, like something like the most menial sort of task you can think of, but it's not menial either. And and of course we've talked about this before. He uses a hammer. He's all that stuff. He's suited for it. But I mean, it's cool that he has to do all that because again, we like him more because these things end up not being beneath him, and he doesn't even look at it as this quaint thing. Look at these quaint humans. I think that's something that the movies managed to capture pretty well, especially the first one. And I think that without Simonson, I'm not sure they would have managed that. That's where that comes from. It seems to me. Not that I've read much Thor. This is what I've read now, but that's there, and I'm impressed that it's there.
No, they take a lot from this. They take a lot, obviously, from Stanley and Jack Kirby because they're the ones that created that version of the character, and they take a lot from JMS.
From JMS, yeah.
Influence from his run there, and we should do JMS's Thor at some point. I
have it now. One of our viewers sent it to me once and has begged me to review it, and I need to do that. So yeah,
I think you would like it especially because Asgard gets put in the middle of the Midwest in that run.
Oh, cool. So there's other precedents for Asgard getting put on Earth someplace.
That's, I think, the first time it happened. JMS put it in like a big field in the middle of the Midwest, and it's awesome. Like the Warriors 3 like go to a bar and have drinks with these dudes in the Midwest. It's awesome, like these farmer people. But anyway, we're getting off topic.
And then later it happens again.
No, like it's still.
Oh, is it the same? Oh, okay.
Yeah, Tony Stark builds like a new Asgard.
Okay. So that's the difference between Asgard and Asgardia or whatever?
Yes.
Okay, all right, cool. Sorry, I needed that history lesson.
That's okay.
Anyway.
But yeah, Simonson is definitely, I think, doing the legwork that Stan Lee didn't really have time to do because he just wanted to tell stories about a guy that's a superhero that, Thor that fights crime. Like, it would have been a very long time when the character was introduced to have him learn those lessons and be a superhero at the same time. It would be really strange. Like, he would have had issues like the Thor movie where he's walking around like asking for horses at pet stores,
Yeah, and how long can you really get away
back
with
in the
that?
60s, like, kids were trying to read superhero comics, so like, I don't know what this is, why am I reading this, you know? So I think Simonson's doing necessary, like, character progression, legwork here. I don't want to call it legwork because that's kind of the meaning, like it's something that you have to do. Like, he didn't have to do this, and it's done very well.
Well, he also doesn't make it feel like it's a custodial duty like you're talking about.
Exactly.
He makes it feel natural and like something you want. And again, I just, it gives him some more dimension. I like him more because I see, I see that humanity, I see that appreciation for humanity. And like I said, it's paid off so well. Like, I didn't expect that was going someplace. Everything comes together at the end of this, but it's not that irritating, like, end of a TV show where we have to have cameos by every character that's ever appeared in this. Like they don't. He doesn't do that. There are a lot of characters that come back, but there's two things he did that I was really surprised by. First of all, like I said earlier, and I won't keep hitting this. I was surprised that Curse was back and mattered.
Yeah,
I
that's
also,
a character that I thought originally would just fade away into obscurity and never show up again.
I also laughed my face off the first panel he's in this part of it, because he's sitting on a bench and he's just slumped over, and it's so absurd looking. Just that guy in that armor just sitting on a bench slumped. I don't know why. I laughed out loud when I saw it. But the other thing I was very surprised and kind of impressed with was Balder has already gotten his day. And this is not about Balder anymore. Like, we're past that. And I really kind of expected... You know, I said this in an earlier video, and I could tell that you had this look on your face like, well, we're never going to bring this up again because it doesn't happen. I really expected... And I thought he was planting some seeds for this, and if I read it again, I'll look for that and see if this really seemed like a thing he was doing or if I was projecting. There's a thing where it seems like when Balder becomes king that there's kind of this maybe groundwork laid down for the difference in how Thor would run things and how Balder would run things, and that they're going to butt heads. That never happens. And the story that's told at the end of this, it's not about that. So I'm not complaining that that doesn't happen, but like, he easily could have shoehorned something like that in there, and it's just not what stuff's about. Now, Balder is also kind of taken out of play because he gets sick, like everybody else gets sick, and so you have all this stuff with the Frost Giants, and he does get better enough to deal with them. And so I'm not saying he gets nothing to do, but this section is not even kind of a character thing for Balder. He's not, like we've done that already. And I guess I'm just saying that I'm impressed that he doesn't feel like he has to be gimmicky and go, okay, I gotta get my favorite character, because you can tell Balder's gotta be one of his favorite characters. Yeah. I'm not making this all about my favorite characters just because I want to write about them. He takes the story where it naturally has to go because of choices characters make. That's very sophisticated for something like this, and I'm impressed that he went there, especially in ending this run, and thank God this got a definitive finish.
I was going to mention that too, because you look at so many of the like heralded like runs in especially Marvel history, and like Peter David's Hulk. I haven't read that till the end because they haven't released it all in trade yet, because it's a really long run. That didn't get the end it was supposed to. Claremont didn't.
Claremont really didn't. Yeah, with what he wanted to do with Wolverine and everything. Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Frank Miller ended Daredevil, I think, in the way that he wanted to with Born Again. I could never read another Daredevil story again and be satisfied. Not that there aren't other good things, because, you know, Wade's run is fantastic. What other people have done with the characters since Frank Miller got on that book are great. But Born Again could be the final Daredevil story when he's recovered and happy and walking away with Karen Page. You could never see anything from that character again and be like, okay, this character's story is over and I'm satisfied.
I'm not sure this isn't that way.
I know, right? Like, I'm so glad that Simonson was able to end the run on his terms in an organic way, and I'm very impressed with that. And one of the things you mentioned too that made me think, I love that this ends up being the classic Thor conflict. The Frost Giants are invading Asgard. It makes it so sophisticated, you know? Like, that's just, you know, in Thor comics, that's happened so many times. Odin goes to the Odin sleep. The Frost Giants go, okay, Odin's asleep. We got to attack them now. And they always lose. But, like, there was some legitimate threat here. Like, you thought the Frost Giants might potentially take over Asgard because they have this elaborate plan in place.
They're more powerful than they've ever been before. They're smarter about it. I like that Iceman is involved. I was really kind of impressed with that. There's a whole bunch of payoffs to things where there's setups, and you don't know they're setups. And if he had never come back to them, it wouldn't feel like it was missing anything, but it's more impressive because of the way those things are being like laced together. So like he brings in so two examples. The first is the Frost Giant thing. He set that up in Balder in that miniseries. You didn't have to read that necessarily to appreciate this, but the fact that he brought up the Frost Giants there, that he put Utgard Loki where he put him, and then all that comes back at the end of this, you're like, oh, he was laying the groundwork for that in the Balder mini? Oh, okay. And then also, there's precedent for the kind of sickness that Loki is using, that he gives to everybody in Asgard in this. They keep mentioning, oh, this is a lot like the sickness that we had in the Balder mini. Yeah, you think that's a coincidence? You think Loki wasn't paying any attention? No, that's groundwork. But also, we mentioned last time that we thought that the whole Weapon X, Weapon X. That the whole I just got done doing
about Iceman.
Just got done doing a podcast on the Wolverine.
Oh, okay.
We got help me out, X Factor. So we talked last time about X Factor and how he was writing it, and so it seemed a little bit like, I mean, I don't want to say it was self-indulgent, but a little bit, where it was like, okay, we got to bring in X Factor because that's some people I'm using, that's some people I'm writing in this other book, and then like Loki uses Iceman to repower and regrow the Frost Giants. That's inspired.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Like, I was like, oh, cool. So, like, he's just really smart in the way he introduces things, and he's constantly messing with my expectations by doing those things. And again, if that had never paid off, I look back at that X Factor thing and be like, well, that was a fun little interlude. He keeps surprising me. He goes, here's an interlude. Nope, no, it's not. Oh, and the whole Frog Thor thing? Yeah, we're going to bring that back. There's going to be a whole reason for that, too. And he's really good at that.
It makes you think that, like, and I don't know if he was able to do this. Like, I know comic book writers plot ahead of time, but it makes it seem like he plotted this whole thing, like, point by point, exactly as he wanted to do it before he even started writing the first issue.
And see, I doubt he completely did that, and that's what
I don't think
that's
he did
what
either.
impresses
I don't think
me.
that's possible.
It feels that way, but if he had done that, I think that it's likely, at least with a lot of things that I've read, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, that so many things that you know because they come out and tell you that they plotted it ahead of time and that they told you this is going to happen, this is going to happen. A lot of the times it looks so much more plot driven and like characters make choices because the script tells them to. I think it's very, 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 very hard. For me, it's impossible. I'm not capable of writing this way. Maybe this guy is just that much better than any writer I've ever seen do something this complicated. But like, if it was all, I plotted every single plot point ahead of time, I don't know how he makes it as character-driven as it is. I don't know how you do that. And so I think it's a lot more likely that he's just got ideas in his head where he plants a thing and he goes, okay, maybe he writes himself a note. All right, I had this X Factor thing. What if? Like, I think this kind of plotting, I think character-driven fiction is all about what ifs. I think you go, okay, let's not miss an opportunity. What if later on we did a thing with Iceman and the Frost Giants? Peg that on the board for later.
Yeah, true.
And then, if we get ourselves in a situation where it makes sense for that to happen, we'll take it off the board and we'll put it in there. But we're gonna not bring it in if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't seem like a character-driven thing. So I mean, like a lot of people start with an ending when they start writing a story. They in their minds they go, I'm gonna write toward this ending. This is a thing that I like to do. I'm gonna write toward an ending, and this is where I think it's all gonna wind up. That ending almost always changes if you're making it a fiction that is driven by characters making choices. And I really feel like that's what he did here. I'd love to know what this ending is versus what he thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and you're completely right. Like, in every creative writing class I've ever taken, and granted I haven't taken as many as you, I've taken a few, but the advice that I always took to the most heart that the teachers would say was, when you write a story, the first thing you want to do is you want to have your characters, you want to fully realize their personalities, you want to know who they are, and then you just put them in interesting situations and see what happens. That's how you write fiction. And I think that's exactly what Simonson did here, and maybe that's why it feels so methodical and planned, because his characterizations are so consistent.
Yeah. Sure, and so what you do with that is you just don't waste opportunities. Because you will come up with cool ideas as it goes along, and a lot of the time the things that you'll come up with will be things related to what you wrote earlier, and you'll be like, well, so I'm not sure, for instance, that he planted like Scourge, for instance, to do anything at the end. I think it was, I got this guy, what can I do with him?
Yeah, it's interesting.
We got these kids, what
Scourge,
do I do with these kids? Oh, I've got this character that's just hanging out in a dungeon somewhere. What if he was not as evil as we thought he was, There again, a what-if statement. That's how you write yourself out of holes, You go, okay, I've got this hole, and then I've got these things just lying around. What can I do with them, And so you're using your surroundings.
Yeah, exactly. And reading this again, the one thing that it did make me think of in relation to Scourge was, I'm all that much more disappointed with Thor: The Dark World and how Scourge was like not nearly as interesting in that movie.
Wait,
as
was he in that?
Yeah, he was. He's the big like dark elf guy with Malekith, his like thug henchman guy.
That's Scourge?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't look like Scourge.
Yeah, I know.
But Malekith didn't really look like Malekith, so...
Yeah, that is true.
Oh man, that's so unfortunate. Because I know a lot of people really love that movie, and that's totally fair, but I don't think it was as entertaining if it had been had I not read this. Like, ignorance is bliss, man. I wish I hadn't read this before seeing that movie. It's just how I feel about it. Yeah, man.
And you hadn't even read the full thing before you went and saw that movie either.
No, I hadn't. And again, as I always say, I mean, I always feel the need to put this caveat in. I'm not saying it's got to be exactly like the book. I'm saying that it missed opportunities, you know? It took characters that were so interesting and made them so not to me after reading this. I mean, you know, like, okay, for instance, again, I like to compare, I don't know why I do this, I like to compare Loki and Magneto. Let's do it again. So,
well, I mean, they're very similar villains.
So, Magneto in the comics is a very different character than the Magneto in the movies. The Mystique in the comics is a different character than the Mystique in the movies. But I like them in the movies. I feel like they're both really realized characters. I don't think there's those kind of wasted opportunities. They went a different direction with them, but they're very... And with Magneto, he's a similar character.
Yes,
but they're still fascinating. They're still three-dimensional. They're still very realized. Malekith could have been a different thing, but he's kind of just a plot device.
Yeah, and I mean, supposedly there were scenes in that movie that were cut showing, like, the Dark Elf culture and stuff like that, like, before. So maybe it's just a matter of what was cut from the movie. Who knows?
Maybe.
And
but still,
Chris Yost wrote the script for that movie. He was a writer I like a lot.
But
so.
even still, the way he was characterized... I can't imagine that he was that much more interesting.
He didn't say enough to have a character.
At all.
Like, if there were more scenes of dialogue with him, he could have been an interesting character. That's what I mean.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're going to make Malekith, of all people, that stolid, you got to really work really hard to make him as interesting as he was in the book. That's all I'm saying. He could be, but that is the exact opposite of that character. He's not stolid.
Yeah, Malekith reminds me a lot in the comics of like a court jester kind of guy. You know?
Exactly. And I wanted to see that realized. I don't mean to just sit here and review Thor: The Dark World. There's a lot of things I really like about that movie. I'm just saying that, boy, sometimes the more I familiarize myself with certain things, it affects the way I look at other things. That is the only point I'm making.
Right, and to give credit to Thor: The Dark World, I think, if anything, the one thing that I got right in that movie was Loki.
And
Loki is fantastic now.
The spitting image of what he is in this.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, that's not why it's good. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. It's just
more importantly, like what you did, like you said about Magneto, they take him in a different direction where they give Loki what he's wanted this whole time and hasn't been able to achieve.
That's a good point, isn't it? Yeah, and then see what it would be like if he had that. Well, I mean, I guess we haven't seen that yet, but...
Right.
Exactly, but
yeah, just seeing that grin on his face, man.
Oh, like. That was crazy. Anyway, what else do we want to say about this?
Buscema, once again, tearing it up on art. I love Buscema's art in this. So, like, the 2-page spreads of Thor fighting the Midgard serpent, beautiful. Beautiful stuff.
Now, if memory serves, though, those are finished by Buscema. But but they're actually drawn by Simonson, and you're talking about Yorman.
It says writing and layout. So he laid out the panels, and Buscema drew in.
Are we positive he didn't pencil some of this? Because
I mean, I'm just looking at this issue right here.
Yeah. That's what it said for me.
Layouts,
I guess
it might be in a different one.
Here, I know, but what I'm saying is, I don't know that layouts just means putting the boxes where they go, because the issue we're talking about, they're all full-page spreads. So if that's the case, all we're saying is, he said every page is going to be like this.
When someone does a layout, they do like a rough sketch of what they want the page to look like. Like they'll be like, character, I want him here.
Yeah, okay.
They'll do like a rough outline. And then the artist will come in and finish, like, when they say finish, they mean in the terms of someone that's getting layouts from another artist.
Yeah, right.
They will like pencil all of the stuff generally that the other artist was showing them what they wanted the page to look like.
What was weird about it...
Simonson composed the pages.
Yeah, okay. What was weird about it to me, though, is that this issue made me want to go back on a thing I said last video, which was couldn't tell the difference, but this as much as I thought I might, between Buscema's artwork and Simonson's artwork. And then I read this, and it looked like I was looking at Simonson again, and I started to realize what the differences were. And you're right; it might have everything to do with the choice of what we're looking at and at what angles. It might have everything to do with that, because if Buscema had drawn this, it might have been epic. I mean, had decided what they were going to look like, it might have been epic. But good God, was this epic. I have not before Death of Superman seen this many full-page spreads in a single issue. And
he was completely effective.
Oh man, it was breathtaking. I've never seen anything like this. And how cool is it that in the home stretch we get this issue? You know,
it's really cool.
It is maybe the most powerful artwork in the entire book, with him going up against the serpent. It's amazing. I love how close we get to it. Just like these enormous. I mean, it's gorgeous. Every single page could be a poster on your wall. You know,
it could. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we often, as I'm saying, as a collective community, and I think you'll agree with me when I say this, we often gripe about the 90s as being the era of just, some of those books, you go back and look at them, it's just two-page spread after two-page spread after two-page spread with, like, zero story. And people are like, oh, you shouldn't use too many two-page spreads in an issue because you won't be able to tell a story. Walter Simonson and Sal Buscema beg to differ.
Well, they don't do the whole run like that.
Effectively, you use your space.
They don't use the whole. They don't do the whole run that way, and I think the tell is if you get to the end of this issue and you can't imagine it any other way. That's the way it had to be, and that's the way I felt with it. You know, I got to the end of that issue and I went, I don't know how else you show me that action sequence. And didn't you want to see that fight take up the entire issue? Like, rarely do I want that. You know, rarely do I want it. But the thing that's important to remember is that Thor doesn't have his powers right now. Thor is relying on the suit that he built, and if this dragon serpent thing eats him, he's going to be alive with all of his bones crushed. I mean, like so there's a lot at stake during this. If we'd gotten this issue, let's say this same situation, he fights a giant serpent thing, like 3 issues in, it wouldn't have had the same impact, and it would have felt gimmicky. I would have felt sensationalized maybe if he had done it every page like this. But I mean, like, this is the culmination of some stuff, you know. Thor deserves to have this epic fight realized the way we get to see it here. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, this is like his treat and our treat simultaneously for going through everything we've been through.
It's Thor fulfilling his mythical destiny.
Yeah,
like, this is
that's
what
important.
He's been telling, like, what he's going to do for his whole life.
It's a good point, but I still think it matters more when he could get killed.
Yeah, exactly. And he's at his weakest, more importantly. That's what I was going to say. Like, we have the stuff from the myths and the stuff from this story specifically informing it, so it makes that all that much better.
Boy, those teeth on that serpent, man. Like, that's...
Yeah,
that stuck with me.
What I thought was weird about that serpent was the fact that it pretended to be Fing Fang Foom for a while.
What was that about?
I have no
Why
idea.
Was it? Yeah, I had the same thing, and I was like, apparently, if Simonson's writing Thor, he can't go 2 issues without something pretending to be something else. Like,
yeah.
Everything has to be in disguise in this book, and most of the time it works. By the way, there was a really funny one toward the end with was it Loki pretending to be a female frost giant?
Yeah,
that was hilarious.
And that's a classic Loki thing. And the Fing Fang Foom thing, the only thing I can think of is, if memory serves, didn't Thor fight Fing Fang Foom earlier in this run?
Maybe that's what it was, and maybe it was...
But still, why would the serpent need to pretend to be him? I don't
Why
understand.
would the serpent even know that Thor ever fought Fing Fang Foom? He wasn't there.
Yeah.
It wasn't on YouTube. How would he know?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. That was really weird. Like, he just burst out of it like a costume. Like, he was wearing a Fing Fang Foom, like, cloth suit. It was
sort of the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Because it was just so ridiculous. A dragon pretending to be another dragon.
And a dragon that, and then, like, he doesn't recognize Thor. So there's that mistaken identity with Thor just being in that thing, and I'm just like, dude, just look at the hair. It's Thor. What's wrong with you? Something I was a little surprised by getting to the end of this was that Thor still has the beard and looks like he did earlier, and I think that that's done on purpose. I think that, like, I expected us to get to the end of this, and the last panel would be a big triumphant, and Thor, it looks like he did at the beginning, and we're like bookending it. I think there's a physical transformation that happens in this that is supposed to reflect the emotional transformation, you know, going on in this book. And so, you know, I'd be interested to know, I don't know who took over after this. I'd be interested to know, like, at what point he gets the beard, he loses the beard, and if it's even dealt with that he's disfigured under it. Or if somehow he lost that when he got out of the Destroyer, but I expected him to lose that when he got out of Frog Thor morph, and he didn't. So, so I don't know. I've been fixated on that. Like, when does he stop being disfigured? And I would be very surprised if they didn't just not even explain it.
I don't think they do. If memory serves, I think during, like, didn't read, like, a lot of the stuff after this until, like, Dan Jurgens, and he looks completely different in Dan Jurgens' run, which was 10 years later in the 90s. So, or I don't know when this ended, but it ended in the 80s, and regardless, about 5-10 years later, he looks pretty much like, you know, classic Thor. So.
So that's the thing Simonson didn't get to change, you know, didn't get to pay off and do well. That's not the right way to put it. I mean, yeah, he gave him a disfigured face. Whoever takes over should be able to get him out of that somehow, and I'm sure that's what Simonson was thinking. But like I said, I mean, maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but the way I'm looking at it is Thor looking totally different at the end means something. Yeah,
it does, and Thor does die at some point in the 90s during, like, The Heroes Reborn or something. I haven't read it, but he dies, and then JMS's run at the beginning, Thor is resurrected, because they didn't have a Thor book for, like, a long time. Thor wasn't in any Marvel comics, and weren't publishing a Thor book, which after this high, going down that low, I mean, I guess the creative fallout after he and Jurgens left was real bad. I don't know if Jurgens was on the book at that point, but anyway, it's crazy to think about, like, a run this good happening at Marvel and then that character just disappearing for years, you know? Like, that would never happen today.
Well, he wouldn't just disappear, but something, although, you know, sometimes you wonder, you know, there are characters that sometimes come back that you never thought would be popular again, and then there are characters that fall out of popularity where you're like, how did we not have a Silver Surfer book for so long? You know,
that was a crime.
There's things like that you got to wonder about. So, I think this happens more often than we'd like to admit. I mean, not to that severity, but I think that, not to that extreme, but I think that what does happen is somebody has such a great run that nobody wants to follow it, and the next person that comes on is either not up to the task or is like intimidated. And they go, well, this run's not going to be as good as the last one, so I guess I'm just here to fill the shoes for a while, you know? Like, I think that happens a lot. I think it's like somebody who has, like, a killer karaoke song at a karaoke bar, and the next person just doesn't even want to follow that.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at, you know, Thor is a good example of that. Even this run, like, I don't think there's anything as good as this between Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's run post that, and then you get, like, Jurgens and he's like, not everyone can be Amazing Spider-Man and be good consistently for 20 years.
Years and years and years, yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think is kind of distinctive about that, too, is, and we don't have this now, and tell me if you agree with this, I feel like back in the day, when we're talking this kind of period, you know, 80s, like, it's a big deal if people remember a run based on creators, because I think a lot of people read books and just liked the characters, and they might remember a run, but they wouldn't be able to tell you who wrote it or drew it. And I mean, like, diehard fans, yeah, and I think these days a lot more so, our whole culture seems to be a lot more fixated on the behind the scenes and who makes things. And, you know, we know directors' faces now. We know what Joss Whedon looks like. We know what we know what JMS looks like. You know, we know what Abrams looks like. So like, you know, I think the whole culture thinks about those sorts of things. I think like a lot of people could tell you now who Frank Miller is because he's been involved in movies, and I think a lot of people, as huge as he was in the 80s, I think most people that didn't read comics couldn't tell you who that was. So the fact that people, even before people were talking about people's names, could say, oh yeah, Simonson's run on Thor. So Amazing Spider-Man, I think, is a thing that for a lot of people, it was just good for so long, nobody even paid attention to who wrote or drew it.
Right. It was kind of like a brand loyalty thing. You're like, Spider-Man is a good product. I'm going to give it my money no matter who's writing or drawing.
It's always
good.
And I think X-Men sort of had that too, and people just didn't realize it was the same guy for so long.
I know, and it's crazy to think about that. I mean, I think it's interesting, like, the first creator that I think kind of sold themselves as, like, the guy behind the scenes that everyone know their face was Stan Lee.
Stan Lee.
You know, everybody who read Marvel Comics knew, Stan Lee answered their letters. There was photos of him in the back pages. Like, he put himself everywhere. If anything, Stan Lee was, like, one of the best self-promoters ever.
Yeah. Yeah, his face for the fans was as recognizable as any of his characters.
Exactly, yeah. So
it helped that he had cartoon shows.
That is true.
Because I mean, he did that. But I think a lot of that was that cross promoting. People didn't think about that kind of stuff back then. I mean, he was so ahead of his time in that sort of stuff. That's how we do it now. We have millions, and we throw millions and millions into movies and hope that people will go back and forth between the mediums. It doesn't always work, but that's what Marvel and that's what Disney and Warner's hope that you do.
Yeah, exactly. He used to do some really, like, strange things. Like, you go back, they have, like, you can listen to, like, Marvel records. They used to mail records to people who were in the clubs, and you can hear, like, Stan Lee and, like, Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, like, singing and stuff like that. It's really interesting.
I've heard that, yeah. He was like, let's throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I think Marvel as a company, at least for a long time, and obviously at this point, we're talking the 80s. This was, for me, like, the 60s to the 80s are like the golden age of Marvel.
Yeah, I think so too.
All of their books are, pretty good from the 60s to the 80s, depending on what you're looking at, obviously.
And then how ironic is it? This is just my opinion, but I guess if I'm right about my opinion that this is ironic. How ironic is it that during that period there's a lot of DC stuff that just kind of fell by the wayside that nobody paid attention to. There's gems, there's good stuff, but then like the 90s is when DC really picked up, and then the 90s is when Marvel really fell off, because most of the things that people talk about from the 90s, or talk about from DC as like big important seminal runs, like the 80s, early to mid 90s stuff, and then Marvel, it's like, you had some gems in there. You had Marvels, and you had some you had Origin, you had standalone. So I think Origin was 90.
You had Infinity Gauntlet.
You had standalone stuff, but most of that stuff weren't like big runs of characters, right? Like when we think of X-Men, and we're like, well, we like things about Age of Apocalypse, but how great was it really? And things like Maximum Carnage, as much as you and I love it, how good was that really? And stuff like that. Everybody hates the Clone Saga for Spider. People look at 90s Spider-Man and they go boo, So I just think that's fascinating. There is.
Like, the death of Harry Osborn is one of my favorite Spider-Man stories, and that happens in the 90s, and Mishima drew that too.
Oh, really? Okay, well that's great. Well, we're not even reviewing this anymore.
We're just talking about Marvel stuff.
Marvel,
you guys don't mind.
In general, yeah. Well, anyway, I guess you and I can finish this conversation at our leisure, or perhaps do another podcast about whatever comes to mind with Marvel. But anyway, do you have any final thoughts about this whole run?
This is, I know we've been saying this consistently throughout the videos, but like, this is one of my favorite runs on any comic book of all time. This is the thing that made me a fan of Thor as a character. I recommend, even like, you saw Captain Logan over the course of these videos be converted to like something sword and sorcery. So even if it doesn't seem up your alley, if you saw Thor in the movies and have any sort of passing interest in a guy that strikes things with hammers and there's thunder involved and he has a cape and he flies, you will really enjoy this. It's not like inaccessible to the point like some of the 60s comics. Like, as much as I love 60s Amazing Spider-Man, like it's overwritten in a lot of places. There's a lot of talking and describing things that are happening, but I think Simonson makes up for it in just how well everything else is done. So I think it might take a little bit getting used to, but I'm saying, like, if you can deal with that and get used to it and get through a little bit of it and I don't want to make it sound like it's a chore to get through it or anything, but I'm just saying give it a shot. Don't immediately look at it and say, oh, there's too many words on this page. I'm not going to look at it. Give it a shot, and I think you will have a great time. It's fantastic stuff.
For some people, this book would be overwhelming, and because they wouldn't be used to the language and just how many words are on a page, and what might at first feel like a slog. But let me suggest two things. First of all, pace yourself. Maybe don't read 8 issues in one sitting like you and I have been doing. And I think that part of the reason that we took as long as we did is just because of how long it takes to read 8 issues of this. So, I mean, pace yourself. You know, read this book over the course of 6 months or a year. You know what I mean? Like, really give yourself some time with it. You know, read it, like, because I think this reads pretty well month to month even. I think, like, read one of these every few days, even every 30 days. Read it like when it came out, you know? Like do it over the course of some time, or at least a couple of months. You know what I mean? But also, it has its own very distinct pacing. So even though it's going to feel much more slow paced as far now, I don't think that the actual action is slow paced. I think that there's so much happening, and he gives you like so many subplots and lets you know what's going on in people's heads through a lot of things where other people probably would have just skipped those parts, that at first you might think, well, this doesn't seem important right now. I found myself skipping or wanting to skip entire sections at the beginning of this, and I wasn't doing that anymore by the end of it. So there are things where you're not going to understand why it's important right now, and you're going to discover later on that you're glad you read that stuff because it informs what happens later. But, you know, there is a pacing to this. You will fall into it. You will get used to it. And something else I will suggest that's going to sound really funny is this book is more fun if you read it out loud. I started doing that with Jason, and because one of the things you start realizing is that even the you know, what seems like extraneous, and what is to our modern sensibilities, our modern conventions, is a little bit extraneous. And that sounds weird because this book is only 30 years old, but that's a lot in comic book time. And because just the way the medium has changed and the way that like technology has changed the industry, I think that if you, I mean, like, look at how different we look at comics now versus 20 years ago, even. You know.
Yeah, I mean, this run started pre-Watchmen, pre-Dark Knight Returns, so.
Yeah, so like you know, you're reading,
so.
You're reading along on this, and yeah, I did, and you're reading along on this, and a lot of what seems like extraneous, like exposition and stuff, the word choice is so cool.
Yeah.
Like Simonson has this really cool sense of how to put things, and he uses words that you've never heard of and you might have to look up, and also just like he has a really fun, like, poetic kind of knack for how to say things. So there are whole things that you could skip and still know what's going on, but you're gonna miss some really fun language. And if you love language, I suggest read parts of this out loud just to pace yourself. That was a thing that I discovered I really enjoyed doing with this. It's sort of like reading a Shakespeare play again.
Right.
When I was reading it's not Shakespeare. It's not like it's so different from the way that we word things now that it's hard to read. But I had the same thing sort of that I did with Shakespeare, which is I enjoyed that a lot more if I read it out loud. And I kind of had that in places with this, which is not something I've ever said about a comic book.
Yeah, and you make a really good point about the language and looking up words thing. I mean, this is so distinctively a Marvel book. Stanley talks all the time about how he would use like weird words so kids would learn new ones that they have to look up to teach them things.
Yeah, he was conscious about, you know, helping kids get literacy, and it's not a thing people think about.
No, it's not, and I mean, the reverence for like the '60s era of Marvel shines through here, and it's like the best of both worlds for me because I love the '60s. That's like my favorite decade of history, like ever, and. 80s Marvel is probably my favorite era of comics in general. I love 60s Amazing Spider-Man. That's probably like my favorite run. But in general, like in terms of all the things going on at Marvel 80s, you can't beat it. Almost every book they publish had a like definitive or seminal run going on during that time. So I love that he's so like reverential to Marvel's past and stuff because I love history, and the history of this company and their characters is very fascinating to me. So I like all that stuff.
Once again, and I don't have his name in front of me, so I'll make sure and put it on the screen, but I want to thank the guy that sent us the tome. Thank you so much for letting me borrow this. I will be sending it back to you now that we finished this. I'm sorry I had it so long. It was really super cool of you to let me borrow this. Like I said, it was a big deal because it really changed the way I look at this character. I don't know. It's it's a classroom on how to use this medium to its full effect, because I can't imagine this story told any other way. And that is the best compliment I can give to any comic book, because so many comic books want to be a movie or want to be a novel, and or don't think they want to be a novel but really do want to be a novel. And this book wants to be a comic book, and it can only be told this way. So you're not going to read this, or at least I didn't, and think, oh, this feels like storyboards for a movie. It's half finished. This has to be a comic book, and if it is, like just like some of my other favorite comic books, Watchmen, things like that, has to be a comic book. And when you take it and you make it into another medium, it does become something else. And that's the best thing I can say about. I mean, that's the highest praise I can give to a comic book that I really loved.
I couldn't have said that any better. That was great.
I probably could have. I probably could have worked on that.
Logan just said.
Thank you.
But yes, like, it's so refreshing in this day and age where, like, a lot of comics are just movie pitches. Like, you can blatantly tell.
Yeah.
Like, that this is just unabashedly like, hey guys, let's have fun and be a comic book. Let's be aware of what we are. I love that.
And it makes you think as a secondary thing, which is cool. So, like, once again, it's layered. You'd enjoy this on multiple levels. I start enjoying what's happening, and I'm laughing at situations, because Frog Thor and stuff like that, and even Beta Ray Bill is kind of funny at first, and yeah. I mean, like, because they're playing that straight, but he looks ridiculous, and so you're I mean, let's not look at this as anything other than it is. Man. He's a horse dude. It's preposterous. But you're reading this along, and then suddenly it's thoughtful and it's compelling about things, and so, like, the thoughtful thing becomes an afterthought, and you realize as you're enjoying this spectacle, oh my God, I'm thinking, and it's challenging me, and I generally don't want a thing, at least something like this that is meant to be, really fun, and it is over the top and stuff. I don't want a thing like this to be telling me I'm serious and I matter. I want to be enjoying this on a different level, and then suddenly go, holy crap, this is serious and it matters.
Yeah,
that's what I want, and that's what I got with this. This is easily one of the best runs of anything I've ever read.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said again. And I wanted to say one more thing about the movie thing too. It's awesome that we have these type of comics that aren't movie pitches and stuff like that. It just wants to be a comic book. And how cool is it that the big battle in this run in New York City is the battle, like, they take that battle and put it in the Avengers movie, and that's like one of the highest grossing movies of all time.
That's a great point. And I didn't even realize it until you said that last video, and I was like, holy crap, that is that Avengers battle, yeah.
Yeah, like, this thing was unabashedly fun in what it was. It was original, and it ended up informing one of the highest grossing movies of all time. So. And
I guess the only thing that's sort of sad about that for me as a comic book fan is that I know that most of the people that saw that movie will never know that. It'll be unheralded in that way. But who cares? You and I know.
Right.
We know.
That's why it's cool for us.
Yeah, it's cool for us, and I don't mean to be elitist about it, because those people got to enjoy that, and they wouldn't have had that if it weren't for this. So, it continues to matter,
Yeah. And I don't know, it's just so cool, like, seeing things like that adapted, from your favorite stories, and that, like, that's the reason I think I'm loving most of what Marvel does in their movies right now, is that the people behind the movies are reading these things and have reverence for the material. Like, they're seeing the same things in these stories that we are, and they know why we love them so much.
Yeah, and it's not great just because they're going, well, the comics matter, and we've got to use that, and no, it's not just about being faithful to the source material. It's about not missing opportunities, because the distinction is you take something like that scene and you go, yeah, I can't do any better than that. Let's use it, because if everybody in America, if we were Japan and everyone read comic books, first of all, that'd be awesome. But if we were like Japan and everybody read comic books and everybody had read this, if that movie grossed millions and millions of dollars because everybody read this and wanted to go see it, if that's what it was like, then that scene might not have been quite as impactful because everybody would have expected. Well, they wouldn't have expected it because it came from another run. But you know what I mean? If everybody knew where it came from, so in a way, it's cooler because folks don't know about it. They think that it's original, and you know, we're going back to the, so it's about not missing opportunities.
Right, exactly. And I think it's so cool that Simonson's run has had such an effect on Marvel as a company in general, in their like plans, and you know what they're doing, becoming like this global entertainment empire. Like,
yeah.
Simonson's run has informed how many other movies now? The Thor movie, the Avengers, Thor: The Dark World. I'm sure there's things in other movies that we haven't noticed that come from this run or other stuff he's done at Marvel.
And then he's affected X-Men.
Yeah, you know, Apocalypse, a character he co-created with his wife, and I think another artist was involved in that too.
Did they come out of X Factor, or was that someplace else?
I think he first showed up in X Factor.
Wow,
yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, I want to read that stuff.
But don't quote me on that. That's, I think, but I'm not sure.
You and I need to find that stuff and review it at some point, because...
Yeah, Louise Simonson's a good writer. I like her a lot.
She is writing something that I just started reading that just started coming out. What was it? I need to look at my books. I don't remember. There's something from last week that I read from her.
The Cartoon Network thing?
Yes, that's her. Yeah, Super Secret Crisis War.
Yeah, so yeah, that's Walt Simonson's wife.
Okay, I wondered because I was like, oh, is it just a coincidence that that this person's last name is Simonson? I didn't even realize it was a woman because that's got somewhat of a you know gender neutral name.
Right. Yes,
so I was like, oh, I don't even know who this is. Okay, thanks for telling me that because yeah, and it's by the way hilarious. But well, it makes a lot of sense because you know Walt Simonson's about to do something for IDW, and so I guess they're IDW happy now.
Yeah, and they're reprinting.
Me too.
They're reprinting some creator-owned series that he did like in the 90s, I think, called Star Jammers or something like. No, that's the X-Men thing, isn't it? Star Jammers? Yeah. But it's Star something. It's like a sci-fi like space marine book he did in the 90s.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sounds really cool.
Yeah, no, Star Jammers is Scott Summers' dad.
Yeah, that's Corsair.
Yeah,
those guys. But anyway.
Yeah, you know, you gotta have
lots of Walt Simonson greatness going around.
That's awesome.
He must be one of the happiest dudes on the planet.
He must be on cloud nine. I assume the reason he's coming back and doing stuff right now is just because maybe he's getting his he's just getting kind of excited about all the stuff that's getting adapted, and so he can't help but work again. You know, because
and you can tell obviously the people working at Marvel are of age where these are the comics that were coming out when they were reading them and being influenced. So that's why they're like, let's bring back Walt Simonson, one of my favorite artists to work with.
And what's cool about him, too, is that he is not one of these guys who has been out of the game too long or lost his knack for it or got burnt out. He is as good as he ever was. Like, you look at his art right now, looks good.
Yeah, those Hulk issues he did with Mark Waid where Thor showed up,
they're great.
Like you got another issue of this. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't mind people evolving, you know? I don't need McFarlane to draw now like he did in 92.
Right.
But it is pretty cool when they come back and they draw just like that again, you know?
You want Simonson to be like Thor. You want him to be a steadfast
kind of timeless. You know? Yeah. Well, anyway, so huzzah, we're finished.
Yes.
This is the end of Walt Simonson's Thor run. So glad we did this. So glad we read this. The next thing Dan and I are going to try to bring to you, and I don't know what kind of time we have over the summer to get through, how much of this we can get through, but the next thing we're going to try to start is Spider-Man 2099, because...
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, do you have it?
I have most of it.
Okay.
I have a couple gaps here and there because I just couldn't find the issues. The issues of that series are really hard to find.
Oh, are they?
But I have like a good. I think it ran for like 40 issues, and I have like 35 of them. And then there's a one shot where Peter Parker meets Spider-Man 29.
Do you have that?
Peter David also read. Yes.
Okay, because I have that too. So we'll make sure and review that. We may do that one on its own as just one small video. But yeah, so we're gonna go through Spider-Man 2099, probably a few issues at a time, and that's gonna be the next little series we're gonna bring for you. I don't know, as I've said before, what kind of time Dan and I are gonna have together during the school year when Dan goes back to school, but I'm gonna snatch him up every chance I get, and we're gonna keep reviewing comics for you. So, Dan, this was an absolute pleasure, and thanks so very much for doing it with me.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed reading this with a friend. It's like watching a movie that's real long and awesome, you know. I had a great time doing this, and I'm glad you enjoyed it so much.
It was enlightening and really enjoyable. And I discovered that in my old eBay stock, I still have quite a few. I haven't been on eBay for a while now, and I still have a pretty massive collection of things in the comic vault that I've not sold off yet. And I discovered that most of this run is in there, and I'm keeping it now. Originally, awesome, I was going to sell it because I wasn't a Thor fan, and then I went back to it somewhat recently and went, wait a minute, this is the Simonson stuff. What am I doing? So I haven't counted it yet. I need to go through it and see how much of it I've got. But I am probably now going to collect this in issues because looking at it, just eyeballing it, I'm probably only missing about 25-30% of it. So I'm probably going to try to buy the rest of it up. And yeah, this is going to be something you're probably going to give to Jason to read if he's interested in the future. Yeah, and like I said, he read about a quarter of it with me. Oh, he did. Like I said, I was reading it out loud to him. That's how I read some of this. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, and another thing I'd like to review. He loves Frog Thor. He could not get enough of Frog Thor. Oh, I bet. Yeah. I love that Frog Thor is in the Pet Avengers too. That's awesome. Oh yeah, I read an issue of that recently, and I was like, it's Frog Thor. Yeah. But I got you those issues of Thor versus Thanos. Yes, and I've not read Christmas, and we should take a look at that sometime and review that. Thank you for reminding me. Thor fighting Thanos sounds like a good time. Have you read those? I have not, so it'll be a first-time experience for both of us. It'll be fresh, and I think you and I probably it's been a long time for $20.99. Yeah. Yeah, it has. I haven't even read through all of that. I haven't either. I have it in my boxes over there. Dan, I've always said I love $20.99, but mostly I'm talking about the costume design and just the basic premise and just the feel of it, because I've read maybe 6 to 10 issues, maybe. Peter David can do basically no wrong in my book, so I'm sure it'll be great as long as editorial doesn't screw with him. And of course, the new book is about to start. That was slated for July, so it's got to be next week. Yes, it is. It is next week as well. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to start reviewing that on Rapid Fire, but we've got to get started on that as quick as we can since that's about to start up. So, yeah, that'll be fun. Everybody, thanks so much once again for watching. We sure appreciate you. I'm Captain Logan. And I'm Dan. And happy reading.